We have become addicted on consuming huge amounts of fossil fuels, gas, oil, and coal. We're changing the composition of the atmosphere, and the climate around us is changing. This is a major global problem. This is why we have absolutely no choice. We need to turn to nuclear energy because it is both clean, safe, and abundant enough to ensure the survival of our civilization.
Gentlemen, what I'm about to do here is we're going into the nuclear island, the controlled area. So as such, we need to have a dosimeter, and this is an electronic dosimeter which measures any radiation dose. Safety brief before we go anywhere in the plant: no smoking, eating, drinking, or indeed applying cosmetics. And the reason for that is that any potential radiation is an internal hazard, may get inside your body. So any of these acts would indeed do that. So as long as we observe these rules, everything will be perfectly safe. Thank you.
I'm going to increase electrical load to 380 megawatts electrical. So temperature's currently 25.9 degrees C.
I'm a French environmentalist, and I've been working to promote green ideas ever since I've been working 25 years ago.
So, let me get this right, you're an environmentalist who is pro-nuclear?
That's right, I am a pro-nuclear green, and the reason is that nuclear energy is the safest and cleanest energy we have today to protect the environment and to solve the climate crisis and the energy crisis. Most people are not aware that we have already ignited a climatic time bomb. We need to be serious about finding a solution without any taboo and consider all the possible solutions.
Global warming cannot be addressed without nuclear power, I believe. From nuclear power generation, there are no carbon emissions.
When did the nuclear industry first start to promote itself as an answer to global warming?
Hard to say, but I think probably 10 years ago. And it has only ever promoted itself as one part of the answer.
So are people listening?
Yes, I think so.
What kind of results are you seeing?
I think we're seeing nuclear, the N word is much more mentionable in high political places today than it was 4 or 5 years ago, or even 2 years ago.
We're actually right on top of the power station. This is called the central block, and on either side of it is what they call reactor 1 and reactor 2 pile caps. They really are the top of the reactor cores, where the fission process is taking place, splitting the uranium atom to release energy in the form of heat to turn the water in the boiler tubes into steam. They're both operating at the moment. It's just that at the moment they are exchanging fuel.
And the plant still runs even when the fuel's
Oh yes. What actually happens is that they don't shut the plant down, they drop the power down.
I've been told that the refueling process is one of the most dangerous processes of the actual nuclear power generation.
No, I wouldn't use the word dangerous. It's absolutely critical that everybody works to the fail-safe systems, works to the operational rules, and applies every safeguard that's there. And in fact, indeed, we aren't wearing any equipment at the moment to protect us against contamination because the likelihood is so slight.
This does actually say there, contamination controlled area.
Yes, that is below there. So if somebody was to climb down there and crawl underneath it, we have classified that as a contamination controlled area category 2, which means there is a possibility of slight levels of contamination below there.
Australia has a particular problem. We produce 90% of our electricity from fossil fuels, and that makes Australia one of the largest emitters of carbon per head of population in the world.
And so is it likely that Australia will make the jump to nuclear power?
Well, there's a renaissance of nuclear power around the world, with currently some 27 nuclear power stations under construction and projections for another 136 to be commenced within the next decade. And Australians recognise that we can't have the highest carbon emission per head in the industrialised world and do nothing about it. You would generally build power plants in pairs so that the number will be even, and the even number may well be between 6 and 14, probably possible to fit into the Australian situation.
That sounds like a lot. So you're saying coal is at 80% at the moment of Australia's power comes from coal. So if you built those nuclear reactors that you're talking about, how much would coal amount for then of the...
Even with that, even if you went to the higher end of that, you would still probably be only having, in Australia, less than 20% of the power being produced by nuclear.
Really?
Yeah.
I'm right down the very bottom, mate. I just want permission to go through the yellow cones into the drill area.
Yeah, not a problem, mate.
It's obviously true that nuclear reactors produce less carbon dioxide, which wrecks the climate, than coal, gas or oil-fired power stations. I don't think anyone can deny that. I don't think it's right, however, to say that it's carbon-free, some people say, because it's patently not carbon-free, because you create carbon emissions in the mining of uranium and in the processes that make your reactors, and sometimes they have to use conventional backup generation and all sorts of things. So it's a low carbon emitter, but it's not a zero carbon emitter. And given that sort of basic fact, the industry, which in my view was faltering, dying even, has grasped onto the climate change issue like a dying man clutching a straw, because it sees climate change as its saviour, as a way of making the nuclear industry look environmentally friendly, which, to be frank, it never has done.
You've heard of the organisation Environmentalists for Nuclear Power?
Yeah, it's about 2 people and a dog, isn't it?
How do most environmentalists respond to your point of view?
The environmental community today is divided on these questions. There used to be a sort of unanimous viewpoint that, oh, nuclear energy is bad. Now it's becoming a hot subject. Now it might be that other people don't share my point of view, but there are a great number of people, including leading environmentalists, who do share my point of view, so at least it's worth considering. For example, Patrick Moore, he was one of the co-founders of Greenpeace in 1971. And he believes, like I do, that we have no choice. We need to go for nuclear energy because it's the only one that solves the problem.
It's a boom industry at the moment, is it? Uranium mining?
Certainly we've seen dramatic changes driven by demand for energy, and we've seen spot price this year alone, so increase of something like 70% to over $60 US per pound at the moment. Last year we produced about 6,000 tonne of uranium, and it's sold under pretty strict international and Australian safeguards into Europe, Asia, parts of Asia and the US. Certainly it does create a huge economic opportunity for Australia.
climate change is an immensely serious problem. It is easily one of the most serious problems that humanity is facing. But then, so is the spread of nuclear weapons and the threat of nuclear annihilation. That is a problem that hasn't gone away. And nuclear power is intimately linked to nuclear weapons, always has been, always will be. And so I think the risk is that if we attempt to combat the major problem of climate change by expanding nuclear power, we may be making a big mistake. We may be jumping out of the carbon frying pan and into a plutonium fire. They're kind of like Siamese twins, nuclear power and nuclear weapons, connected at birth. In the UK, nuclear power was first developed, and in the US and in France, to make nuclear weapons. So they built reactors to produce plutonium that you could put into bombs.
This is the grand old lady of commercial nuclear power. It was the world's first commercial nuclear power station, and 47 years later it was shut down, still going strong. So we have reactor room, the control room for reactor 1, part of the Calder Hall power station, which was opened in 1956 by the Queen. Calder Hall itself and the whole UK nuclear energy strategy was born out of the weapons programme. So this was the kind of product of thinking, well, hang on, we're generating this heat whilst producing plutonium, so therefore let's try and use the heat and use that energy to power the homes in the UK and the industries.
At the time, was this place the envy of the rest of the world?
Absolutely, yeah. Absolutely. It was the first one to be commercially viable. It was meant to produce electricity that would be so cheap you couldn't meter it, and it was done before anyone else in the world, which was a great feat at the time.
Although the industry will now say we are completely separate from nuclear weapons, the technologies that they deploy are still the same. The problem is that if you have nuclear technology, you always have the ability to make nuclear weapons. So it becomes very easy, should your government change or the situation change, for you to take a civil nuclear program and make it into a military nuclear program. We're most concerned about North Korea and Iran and their nuclear weapons ambitions.
Tell me, whereabouts in the world are most of the new reactors being built?
Right now in East Asia, Japan, Korea, China, India also. Iran is a major problem, and so is Korea a major problem, and both those problems need to be dealt with by international agreement somehow. Iran, it should be mentioned, however, does have a legitimate aspiration to civil nuclear power. The Russians are building a reactor there which should be operational next year. But that is being done by the Russians on the basis that they supply all the fuel for it and take back all the spent fuel. The Iranians don't get their hands on it at all. But no, look, there are proliferation problems. They do need dealing with, but there isn't a great deal that the international community can do within those countries.
When did this stop working?
It shut down in 2003, and since then it's being prepared for the initial phases of decommissioning. There's actually, requires more people to decommission a power station than it does to actually a nuclear power station than it does to run it.
And can you tell me how long the decommissioning period is for a power plant?
Well, the government's strategy, or the Nuclear Decommissioning Authority's timescale for it as it stands now, is around 120 years. We're working to shorten that wherever possible, but within the framework that we're working at the moment, we're looking at sort of over 110, 120 years to bring final site clearance, if you like.
How many years did the plant actually run for?
47.
And what kind of costs are you looking at?
Calder Hall power station's decommissioning costs will be around £1 billion, as estimated by the Nuclear Decommissioning Authority.
I cannot see any reason why one would now start something like that. I mean, look where it got us. We're locked in a situation where we are now so dependent on our nuclear that we don't know how to best get rid of it. So it's like if you're proud of not having smoked in all your life, and now somebody is telling you, take up smoking because everybody else is doing it, and you would be crazy to do it. It looks as if now Sweden is at least halting its phase out of nuclear at the moment, and the public opinion is a bit wavering. They want to keep the nuclear power plants that we're having as long as they perceive them economic.
I think you'll see more reactors built in Sweden, and if they're not built in Sweden, they'll be built across the border in Finland, and they will happily export to Sweden. I think you'll find new reactors also built in Germany before too long, once they get over their particular political impasse.
What is that? Can you tell me about that?
Well, it relates to minority coalition politics, and in the coalition, as in Sweden, you've got some trenchantly anti-nuclear parties with, perhaps only 4, 5, 6% support in the community, and that sort of gums up the whole works for the time being.
Left foot first, right hand on the knob, and then you listen.
Kom närmare.
Come closer.
3, 2, 1, 0. Vänd om, mätning av ryggsiden.
Turn around like this. Right foot, left hand, and press it, keep it in.
1, 0. Ej kontaminerad.
Ej contaminated means that you have no active particle on you.
The nuclear power stations in Sweden were constructed with a view to have them online for 25 years. Once you have recovered your investment, like, if you have an expected economic lifetime of 25 years, then you've written off that investment. So at the moment, the nuclear power stations in Sweden are money printing machines, because you've written them off, and for every year that you can keep them on, your profit will go up. But what we're seeing now is that some of the reactors, at least, are showing some aging signs.
Safety is the primary object for us, and we think, from the power company's point of view, that it is possible to operate those units for around 40-50 years of lifetime, and that is our aim, to operate them as long as we can.
Isn't it a little unsafe to start upgrading bits of these plants to make them last longer?
No, it's no problem with the safety, but of course you come to a position when the economical situation is not there. I mean, if you should change everything, it's better to build a new one.
Here we can see the control room for Unit 3. So when we are in production, it's very calm, as you see, but of course there is alarm from time to time.
Det var en händelse som man pratade om kunde hända på någon gång på miljoner år. Det batterisäkrade nätet hade ett konstruktionsfel som man vid en ombyggnad i början på 90-talet, då fanns det dessutom en koppling mellan det batterisäkrade nätet och det dieselsäkrade nätet, så att när ett batterisäkrade nät föll, då startade inte en diesel. När nästa batterisäkrade nät föll, då startar inte nästa diesel. Och av fortfarande okänd anledning så klarade sig 2 batterisäkra nät. De sakkunniga professorerna på KTH som har analyserat det, de säger att de förstår fortfarande inte varför 2 startade och 2 inte startade. Egentligen borde alla ha slagits ut. Och har man inte dem tillgängliga, då finns det liksom inget alternativ. Då blir det ju en härdsmälta. Alltså den startar efter 30 minuter och är väl liksom fulländad efter 1,5 timme. Alltså. Så att,
there was a potentially disastrous situation here.
Yeah.
What is that story?
2 of 4 diesel engines didn't operate as they should. But we had good equipment that did not have any problems with the actor. It took about 20 minutes or so, then we had stabilized the situation.
That must have been quite a surprise.
That was a surprise, and therefore we have to redesign a lot in this both reactors, both the number 1 and number 2.
A lot of people ask me, how near were we? And I always say, you can't measure that. I always say, it was too close. I can't say how close, but we should never be as close as we were. Because that's out of all other, that's too dangerous. This technology is too dangerous to be that close.
So why didn't it happen then? What stopped it?
Luck. I just say luck.
Thank you. No contamination.
When you look at Sweden, they've got plants that are going to be continued to run longer than they were ever designed to run, and they are having upgrades. But I've been told that, the whole plant has to be designed to run together. You can't just upgrade parts of it. And that is the reason why they had their incident this year.
Well, their incident was, if you're thinking of the Forsmark incident, was a fairly peripheral and minor issue. But because it was there, it did shut the plant down until they'd got it fixed. And that's the way these things work.
I guess the thing is, it is impossible to really design fail-proof systems, isn't it? That's the point.
Well, I mean, absolutely fail-proof. There's nothing you're going to do that is totally devoid of risk. If that's what you're saying, yes, I agree. You just minimise the risk and get on with life.
Alltså, jag är för kärnkraft, men inte under vilka villkor som helst. Det är ju jättebra med kärnkraft när den går bra. Och det är det absolut värsta helvetet på jorden som finns. Antagligen till och med värre än krig när det går dåligt. Och om man inte accepterar det påståendet, då ska man nog inte hålla på med kärnkraft. Så att jag är inte säker på att kärnkraft egentligen är lämpligt att ingå i någon slags sån här all marknadsekonomi överhuvudtaget. Det är en olycka i en kemisk industri eller i vilken annan industri som helst. Eller attentat i någon tunnelbana eller vad som helst. Det är klart att det är många som dör. Och så får man ju städa upp och det är beklagligt och så vidare, va? Och livet går vidare. Men sen är ju den olyckan förbi. Men det är det som skiljer kärnkraften från vanlig industri. När ett kärnkraftverk havererar eller skulle utsättas för ett attentat, då har man ju en tid därefter som där det inte finns det finns liksom ingen bortre parentes.
Just 20 times higher than natural.
It's 20 times higher than natural here.
But right now we're standing on the road. If to measure there on the grass, it should be more.
The grass will be more.
Yeah, and after the process of the explosion, well, a lot of radioactive dust absorbed by the forest on this side. And that's why all these forests turned into red color at first and died next year after the accident.
Shall we see what the grass says? Do you think it's...
Well, on the grass it's a level of radiation higher in the soil, because now we're on the asphalt. It's a new way, new road. You have to measure on the soil. Sure, it's more.
It's more than twice. It's going up fast.
Mm-hmm.
How did you feel the first time you came here?
Well, first time it was no fear, just something. It was really strange because, sure, we have seen a lot of ancient cities completely abandoned, cities which people left, and this one is really strange because it's a modern city and completely abandoned. Well, nothing saying about the dangerous. It's only this image I could show that's why the city was abandoned. Because the radiation, as you know, have no taste or smell, doesn't smell. We cannot see it. We don't feel it.
How many people lived in the city?
50,000 people.
Tell me what this building is.
Hotel.
A hotel.
It was a hotel. As you can see, Chernobyl nuclear power plant is really close to the city. Just 2 miles. The town was evacuated on the second day after the accident.
And they never came back?
Never came back.
Хочу бы еще один. Ага, хорошо.
Can you tell me why it's necessary to have people still working at the power plant when it's no longer producing any power?
Нет, то, что, понимаете, на любой станции, особенно на нашей, в связи с ее особенностями, скапливается очень много отработанного ядерного топлива. В определенных условиях. Вот мы следим за этим, чтобы оно было в определенных условиях, содержалось. Вот, так что сейчас безопасность на первом месте. А тогда, в 1986 году, на первом месте было производство электроэнергии. Как можно больше. Вот. И, естественно, в таком обществе, как Советский Союз,
What is the actual truthful state of the reactor?
Well, this very model, it illustrates the risks of the destroyed reactor, which are still there. As a result of the explosion, it jumped and then stood almost vertically. It weighs more than 2,000 tons. So, speaking about the risks, these are long-lived radioactive materials. and they are still concentrated inside the destroyed reactor, inside the destroyed units.
Now we're going from the first stage of Chernobyl nuclear power plant to the second, reactor units number 3 and 4.
So the level of radiation will start to go up, will it, soon?
Well, no, it seems to be normal. Well, I think when we'll be very close to number 4, we'll go up.
What are you expecting? What level are you expecting?
Well, I don't know exactly. As for this device is not professional. Yeah, that's why. No, but in any case, if the level of radiation is really high, it shows. You can see.
It's going way up. You'll let us know if we should be worried, right?
One of the basic risks is the condition of shelter structures. There is still a threat of their collapse. Several months ago, the situation was critical. There was a threat of local collapse. This structure was stabilized by additional welding, by additional concreting. People worked only minutes. They worked by teams. Yes, they worked minutes. For example, 20 minutes, half an hour. They constantly replaced each other.
This control panel room was identical to number 1, where we have been now. There are some rooms where it's possible to stay just several seconds, several minutes. This all depends on the level of radiation there.
Those people who work inside, they really do a very risky, a very hazardous work. And moreover, I believe that everybody working at Chernobyl site, especially at the shelter object site, should realize perfectly well where he worked and in what conditions he worked. The risks are still there.
Ну, я бы не сказал, что прям здесь так уж хорошо, прям безопасно. Нет, конечно. Бывшие работники умирают в довольно молодом возрасте, но где вероятность того, что именно вот... Просто у нас маленький городок, таких цифр нету. Потому что не всегда связывает смерть человека именно с аварией на Чернобыльской. Вот он умер, например, от рака, да, но чтобы связать, где-то он здесь поработал, может, в каком-то году там, потом уехал, умер. Чтобы связать, это же нужно доказывать, от этого или нет. Была просто такая цифра. Ага, хорошо.
How many people are currently suffering from the aftermath of Chernobyl? How many people will die as a consequence of the extra radiation that they got, both around directly in Chernobyl, around the area, and also like here in Western Europe? There is a lot of things that we do not know, and plus, you know, it will take quite a long time before we see the full consequences of it.
So how many people are you saying?
56 is the figure in the Chernobyl Forum report last year.
В Советском Союзе еще. что пострадало, так, в общем, 600 тысяч человек.
The death toll happens to stand at 56, according to the best information I have. I'm not in a position to speculate beyond that, nor are you.
I think the political climate, the social climate has changed around the world. And I think not only Greenpeace concerned about it, but it's very clear from indications from both governments here in the UK and the US that nuclear reactors are a terrorist target. So to say Chernobyl will never happen again, whether there is a breakdown in operations, is very, one would hope that would never happen. The fact that nuclear reactors are probably considered much more vulnerable to terrorist attack than they ever were is certainly very real.
Well, I don't think there's any doubt that nuclear stations and nuclear facilities and nuclear transports are all targets for terrorism. I mean, we have evidence that Al-Qaeda, for example, has looked at them. We have specific warnings from the security services in America and in Britain and other countries that nuclear power stations are targets. So we know that they are terrorist targets.
I think this would scare a lot of people. So where did the commercial play?
Well, it wasn't actually a commercial, it was a viral. It's part of a web-based e-alert that we sent out to many of our supporters, and they just passed it on. This is part of much wider work that we're doing, in highlighting the vulnerability that both nuclear waste transports and nuclear power stations are to terrorist attack.
The next train to arrive at platform 3 will be the 710 nuclear waste train to Sellafield from Dungeness.
What's the point in filming this stuff?
Well, I think essentially we wanted to expose, or to at least highlight, just how close the waste passed through railway stations. I mean, as you can see here, that's actually one of the waste transports now, and you're passing along a platform which would, at rush hour would be busy with commuters.
This is a nuclear waste train here?
It's a nuclear waste train passing through now. You've got the main engine there, and the white flask at the back is the casing for the nuclear waste. Radioactive spent fuel. And you can see the absence of security there. You've obviously got the driver on board. And the most alarming thing here is the fact that it actually stops, while people are actually, on the platform.
Please stand well back from the platform edge, behind the yellow line. If a train carrying this dangerous nuclear waste were involved in a serious accident or terrorist attack, the whole of West London would have to be evacuated and thousands could die.
I suppose they'd argue, though, that they're so safely packed away that even if the train crashed, they would be fine.
We commissioned an independent nuclear engineer to look into that, and certainly the casing would appear very robust, but given a situation where you had an accident or a terrorist attack inside a tunnel, where you have the close proximity, you have the right conditions to create, in excess of 8,000 degrees centigrade, which, simply these flasks cannot withstand that heat. And once they're compromised, then you get the spread of radioactive contamination, which, could be spread for many, many miles from the incident itself. And obviously poses a very unacceptable risk to members of the public.
There is a small minority that thrives on fear-mongering and which has an ideological opposition to things like nuclear power, genetically modified foods and all that sort of thing. And yes, they're doing a lot of fear-mongering and have been for ages. But I think that their credibility has more or less worn out.
The recent study earlier this year looked at the reactor design of Flamanville, which is a new nuclear reactor being built in northern France, very close to the English Channel. And it showed that the design of that reactor would not withstand the impact of a 747-400.
Oh, look, it would create a problem. It would probably write off the power plant, for a start. But I think that the amount of radioactivity on these studies that are being done now, worst case accident scenario for a power plant in the United States that is in the middle of a very populated area, show that a major release of radioactivity is very, very unlikely. The most recent and most thorough study suggests that you'd be able to evacuate the area around about it at walking pace.
But how big an area? I mean,
and out to a couple of miles, probably. But that's not likely to become uninhabitable.
Well, I think that's a very optimistic scenario, to put it mildly. It is true that some of the more modern reactors have very thick containments. And there is an argument, and I've seen very good scientific evidence on both sides of the argument, that some of the reactor cores would be strong enough to withstand a direct hit by a large jet. But there are some very good scientists who argue they wouldn't. But of course, terrorists may decide not to fly a plane into it. There's lots of other things you can do that would be equally upsetting.
Such as?
Well, I think the thing that worries me most is people working on the insides. You don't need much imagination, and one doesn't want to spell it out, but enough imagination to manage the harm that a group of insiders in a nuclear station could wreak.
Spent fuel from reactors abroad and also in the UK will arrive here by rail. This is the vitrified product store, which is where all the high-level waste that's generated by the fuel reprocessing cycle is stored. Because the waste is still heat generating, it needs to be cooled, so it's passively cooled, and it'll stay here for between 50 and 75 years, until basically it'll stay here safely until the government decides, where it's going to put a long-term storage.
So why can't this be long-term storage?
I think that because of the timescales we're talking in terms of long-term storage, it's thousands of years, and I think that the government has taken the view that there needs to be a different solution.
So why hasn't anybody been able to establish a high-level waste repository yet? I mean, what are the problems there?
Well, there's no great problems, except political problems. The NIMBY syndrome is rampant.
What's that?
The NIMBY, not in my backyard. But there's no other hassle with that. The nuclear industry is now approximately 50 years old. And yes, governments in some places, particularly this country, the UK, have been very slow to grapple with that.
Every time that the British government has tried to suggest a solution for this nuclear waste, which has been trying to do since about the early 1980s, it's failed. We've been through at least 3 cycles of let's dump it in a hole in the ground, and then the proposals being abandoned. Different sites proposed, different types of waste, different technologies, but that's what's happened basically. And now we've just had a big government investigation, we've had a committee of independent experts looking at it, and hey presto, they've come up with the conclusion that we need to put a hole in the ground, but we don't yet know where, and people should be invited to be host communities for it. And if they are host communities, they'll get certain benefits, maybe the community centres, swimming pools, employment, whatever. But I'm not expecting. I don't think anyone's expecting to be knocked down in the rush for host communities wanting to be, the home for Britain's nuclear waste.
We are standing at this point. Our feet is about 80 meters below the seabed. We have 4 caverns, each one 160 meters long. The biggest one is about 20 meters broad, 20 meters high, and designed for low, medium active waste.
So tell me, underneath this concrete, there's nuclear waste stored?
Yes. Low active waste.
And this is its home now, forever? This is going to be its home forever?
Yes.
What does low and medium level mean exactly? What kind of waste is it?
Well, typically it's filters, for instance. They have to filter water, and it could be clothing and instruments that be contaminated and so on.
And so then what is high-level waste?
The high-level waste comes mainly that's mainly the spent fuel itself. The fuel that goes into the reactor stays there for 5 years, and then it's very high activity that comes out from the reactor. Of course, it's most dangerous in the beginning. It's getting less with time, but we have to wait for a very long time until it is down to low levels. That takes about 100,000 years.
So what are you going to do with high-level waste?
Well, our plan is, first of all, we store it for 30 years, and then we have to take it down the bedrock, into the bedrock, because in the bedrock things happen very slowly. It's the only place where we could try to predict such a long future.
Can you imagine that maybe a better system might develop in 500 years or something, and people will actually be pulling it up and doing something with it?
Yes, I think that's very important to consider, because human beings, we never reach the absolute knowledge. So the repository solution that we must aim for, I think, must be a solution where you can take back, retrieve the waste, do something else with it if future generation comes up with something better. I think it's very important that you have to be humble in a way to think that, okay, we think we have a very good solution at the moment, but in 500 years people could probably think of something else, and they must have the option at that time to take it back if they want to.
We're very lucky that we do have nuclear energy as a solution. Otherwise, most of humanity might just die out, which might not be a bad loss for the planet. But you see, I got married 3 years ago. I have a young son that's 1 year old, and I would rather leave him a planet which is livable, an air which is breathable, and a form of human society where you can still survive and have a happy life. If there was a magic fix that doesn't pollute at all, of course, I'd sign for it immediately with both hands. But solar and wind energies are available, but they are very dilute and intermittent. And unfortunately, they will never produce the amount of energy we need to run our society, our industries. We need something else.
In all seriousness, can renewables actually deliver the kind of power we need that nuclear can?
Well, honest answer, of course I don't know for sure. I can't be certain. But I do know that nuclear power has proven very unreliable. I do know that it absorbs a huge amount of public resources. And I do know that the people who've advocated it in the past have often misled us. And I also know that renewable technologies have been deprived of resources, have not had the same amount of research and development, anything like as the nuclear industry has had. So if you're asking me which industry do I have more faith in delivering me and my children a safe and sustainable future, I would have no doubt in saying the renewable industry, because there's an immense amount of power in the wind and in the waves and in the tide and in the sun. I'm sure it's not beyond our wit to tap it in ways that we need.